Good evening. Tonight we're reading A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Chapter 21, The Pilgrims. When I did get to bed at last, I was unspeakably tired. The stretching out and the relaxing of the long tense muscles, how luxurious, how delicious. But that was as far as I could get. Sleep was out of the question for the present. The ripping and tearing and squealing of the nobility up and down the halls and corridors was pandemonium come again, and kept me broad awake. Being awake, my thoughts were busy, of course, and mainly they busied themselves with Sandy's curious delusion. Here she was, as sane a person as the kingdom could produce, and yet, from my point of view, she was acting like a crazy woman. My land, the power of training, of influence, of education. It can bring a body up to believe anything. I had to put myself in Sandy's place to realize that she was not a lunatic. Yes, and put her in mine to demonstrate how easy it is to seem a lunatic to a person who has not been taught as you have been taught. If I told Sandy I'd seen a wagon, uninfluenced by enchantment, spin along at 50 miles an hour, had seen a man, unequipped with magical powers, get into a basket and soar out of sight among the clouds, and had listened, without any necromancer's help, to the conversation of a person who was several hundred miles away, Sandy would not merely have supposed me to be crazy, she would have thought she knew it. Everybody around her believed in enchantments, and nobody had any doubt. To doubt that a castle could be turned into a sty, and its occupants into hogs, would have been the same as my doubting, among Connecticut people, the actuality of the telephone and its wonders, and in both cases would be absolute proof of a diseased mind, an unsettled reason. Yes, Sandy was sane, that must be admitted. If I also would be sane, to Sandy I must keep my superstitions about unenchanted and miraculous locomotives, balloons, and telephones to myself. Also, I believed that the world was not flat and hadn't pillars under it to support it, nor a canopy over it to turn off the universe of water that occupied all space above, but as I was the only person in the kingdom afflicted with such impious and criminal opinions, I recognized that it would be good wisdom to keep quiet about this matter too, if I did not wish to be suddenly shunned and forsaken by everybody as a madman. The next morning, Sandy assembled the swine in the dining room and gave them their breakfast, waiting upon them personally and manifesting in every way the deep reverence which the natives of her island, ancient and modern, have always felt for rank, let its outward casket and mental and moral contents be what they may. I could have eaten with the hogs if I had had birth approaching my lofty official rank, but I hadn't, so accepted the unavoidable slight and made no complaint. Sandy and I had our breakfast at the second table. The family were not at home. I said, "How many are in the family, Sandy, and where do they keep themselves?" "Family?" "Yes." "Which family, good my lord?" "Why, this family, your own family." "Sooth to say, I understand you not. I have no family." "No family? Why, Sandy, isn't this your home?" "Now how indeed might that be? I have no home." "Well, then whose house is this?" "Ah, would you well I would tell you an I knew myself." "Come, you don't even know these people? Then who invited us here?" "None invited us, but we came, that is all." "Why, woman, this is a most extraordinary performance. The effrontery of it is beyond admiration. We blandly march into a man's house and cram it full of the only really valuable nobility the sun has yet discovered in the earth, and then it turns out that we don't even know the man's name? How did you ever venture to take this extravagant liberty? I supposed, of course, it was your home. What will the man say?" "What will he say? Forsooth, what can he say but give thanks?" "Thanks for what?" Her face was filled with a puzzled surprise. "Verily thou troublest mine understanding with strange words. Do ye dream that one of his estate is like to have the honour twice in his life to entertain company such as we have brought to grace his house withal?" Well, no. When you come to that, no, it's an even bet that this is the first time he has had a treat like this. Then let him be thankful and manifest the same by grateful speech and due humility. He were a dog else, and the heir and ancestor of dogs. To my mind, the situation was uncomfortable. It might become more so. It might be a good idea to muster the hogs and move on, so I said, "The day is wasting, Sandy. It is time to get the nobility together and be moving." "Wherefore, fair sir and boss?" "We want to take them to their home, don't we?" "La, but list to him. They be of all the regions of the earth. Each must hie to her own home. Wend you we might do all these journeys in one so brief life as he hath appointed that created life, and thereunto death likewise with help of Adam, who by sin done through persuasion of his helpmeet, she being wrought upon and bewrayed by the beguilements of the great enemy of man, that serpent hight Satan, aforetimes consecrated and set apart unto that evil work by overmastering spite and envy begotten in his heart through fell ambition, that did blight and mildew a nature erst so white and pure, whenso it hove with the shining multitudes its brethren born in glade and shade of that fair heaven, wherein all such as native be to that rich estate and—" "Great Scott!" "My lord?" "Well, you know we haven't got time for this sort of thing. Don't you see? We could distribute these people around the earth in less time than it is going to take you to explain why we can't. We mustn't talk now. We must act. You want to be careful. You mustn't let your mill get the start of you that way at a time like this. To business now, and sharp's the word. Who is to take the aristocracy home?" "Even their friends. These will come for them from the far parts of the earth." This was lightning from a clear sky for unexpectedness, and the relief of it was like pardon to a prisoner. She would remain to deliver the goods, of course. "Well then, Sandy, as our enterprise is handsomely and successfully ended, I will go home and report, and if ever another one—" "I also am ready. I will go with thee." This was recalling the pardon. "How? You will go with me? Why should you?" "Will I be traitor to my knight, dost think? That were dishonour. I may not part from thee until in knightly encounter in the field some overmatching champion shall fairly win and fairly wear me. I were to blame, and I thought that might ever hap." Elected for the long term, I sighed to myself. I may as well make the best of it. So I spoke up and said, "All right, let us make a start." While she was gone to cry her farewells over the pork, I gave that whole peerage away to the servants, and I asked them to take a duster and dust round a little where the nobilities had mainly lodged and promenaded, but they considered that would hardly be worth while, and would moreover be a rather grave departure from custom, and therefore likely to make talk. A departure from custom, that settled it. It was a nation capable of committing any crimes but that. The servants said they would follow the fashion, a fashion grown sacred through immemorial observances. They would scatter fresh rushes in all the rooms and halls, and then the evidence of the aristocratic visitation would be no longer visible. It was a kind of satire on nature. It was the scientific method, the geologic method. It deposited the history of the family in a stratified record, and the antiquary could dig through it and tell by the remains of each period what changes of diet the family had introduced successively for 100 years. The first thing we struck that day was a procession of pilgrims. It was not going our way, but we joined it, nevertheless, for it was hourly being borne in upon me that if I would govern this country wisely, I must be posted in the details of its life, and not at second hand, but by personal observation and scrutiny. This company of pilgrims resembled Chaucer's in this, that it had in it a sample of about all the upper occupations and professions the country could show, and a corresponding variety of costumes. There were young men and old men, young women and old women, lively folk and grave folk. They rode upon mules and horses, and there was not a side saddle in the party, for this speciality was to remain unknown in England for 900 years yet. It was a pleasant, friendly, sociable herd. pious, happy, merry, and full of unconscious coarseness and innocent indecencies. What they regarded as the merry tale went the continual round and caused no more embarrassment than it would have caused in the best English society 12 centuries later. Practical jokes worthy of the English wits of the first quarter of the far-off 19th century were sprung here and there and yonder along the line, and compelled the delightedest applause, and sometimes when a bright remark was made at one end of the procession, and started on its travels toward the other, you could note its progress all the way by the sparkling spray of laughter it threw off from its bows as it plowed along, and also by the blushes of the mules in its wake. Sandy knew the goal and purpose of this pilgrimage, and she boasted me. She said, "They journey to the Valley of Holiness, for to be blessed of the goodly hermits, and drink of the miraculous waters, and be cleansed from sin. Where is this watering place? It lieth 2 days' journey hence, by the borders of the land that hight the Cuckoo Kingdom." "Tell me about it. Is it a celebrated place?" "Oh, of a truth, yes, there be none more so. Of old time there lived there an abbot and his monks. Belike were none of the world more holy men than these, for they gave themselves to study of pious books, and spoke not the one to the other, or indeed to any, and ate decayed herbs, and not thereto, and slept hard, and prayed much, and washed never. Also they wore the same garment until it fell from their bodies through age and decay. Right so came they to be known of all the world by reason of these holy austerities, and visited by rich and poor, and reverenced." Proceed. "But always there was a lack of water there, whereas upon a time the holy abbot prayed, and for answer a great stream of clear water burst forth by miracle in a desert place. Now were the fickle monks tempted of the fiend, and they wrought with their abbot unceasingly by beggings and beseechings that he would construct a bath. And when he was become aweary and might not resist more, he said, Have ye your will, then, and granted that they asked. Now mark thou, what 'tis to forsake the ways of purity, the which he loveth, and wanton with such as be worldly and an offence. These monks did enter into the bath, and come thence washed as white as snow, and lo, in that moment his sign appeared, in miraculous rebuke, for his insulted waters ceased to flow and utterly vanished away." They fared mildly, Sandy, considering how that kind of crime is regarded in this country. "Belike, but it was their first sin, and they had been of perfect life for long, and differing in naught from the angels. Prayers, tears, torturings of the flesh, all was vain to beguile the water to flow again. Even processions, even burnt offerings, even votive candles to the Virgin did fail, every each of them, and all in the land did marvel." How odd to find that even in this industry has its financial panics. At times see its assignats and greenbacks languish to zero, and everything come to a standstill. Go on, Sandy. "And so upon a time, after year and day, the good abbot made humble surrender and destroyed the bath. And behold, his anger was in that moment appeased, and the waters gushed forth richly again. And even unto this day they have not ceased to flow, in that generous measure." Then I take it nobody has washed since? "He that would essay it could have his halter free, yes, and swiftly would he need it too." The community has prospered since? "Even from that day, the fame of the miracle went abroad into all lands. From every land came monks to join. They came even as the fishes come, in shoals, and the monastery added building to building, and yet others to these, and so spread wide its arms and took them in. And nuns came also, and more again, and yet more, and built over against the monastery on the side of the vale, and added building to building, until mighty was that nunnery. And these were friendly unto those, and they joined their loving labours together, and together they built a fair great foundling asylum midway of the valley between." You spoke of some hermits, Sandy. "These have gathered there from the ends of the earth. A hermit thrivest best where there be multitudes of pilgrims. You shall not find no hermit of no sort wanting. If any shall mention a hermit of a kind he thinketh new, and not to be found but in some strange land, let him but scratch among the holes and caves and swamps that line the valley of holiness, and whatsoever be his breed, it skills not. He shall find a sample of it there. I closed up alongside a burly fellow with a fat, good-humored face, purposing to make myself agreeable and pick up some further crumbs of fact. But I had hardly more than scraped acquaintance with him when he began eagerly and awkwardly to leap up in the immemorial way to that same old anecdote, the one Sir Dinadan told me, what time I got into trouble with Sir Sagramore, and was challenged of him on account of it. I excused myself and dropped to the rear of the procession, sad at heart, willing to go hence from this troubled life, this vale of tears, this brief day of broken rest, of cloud and storm, of weary struggle and monotonous defeat, and yet shrinking from the change, as remembering how long eternity is, and how many have wended thither who know that anecdote. Early in the afternoon we overtook another procession of pilgrims, but in this one was no merriment, no jokes, no laughter, no playful ways, nor any happy giddiness, whether of youth or age. Yet both were here, both age and youth. Grey old men and women, strong men and women of middle age, young husbands, young wives, little boys and girls, and 3 babies. Even the children were smileless. There was not a face among all these 100 people but was cast down, and bore that set expression of hopelessness, which is bred of long and hard trials and old acquaintance with despair. They were slaves. Chains led from their fettered feet and their manacled hands to a sole leather belt about their waists, and all except the children were also linked together in a file 6 feet apart by a single chain, which led from collar to collar all down the line. They were on foot and had tramped 300 miles in 18 days, upon the cheapest odds and ends of food, and stingy rations at that. They had slept in these chains every night, bundled together like swine. They had upon their bodies some poor rags, but they could not said to be clothed. Their irons had chafed the skin from their ankles and made sores which were ulcerated and wormy. Their naked feet were torn, and none walked without a limp. Originally there had been 100 of these unfortunates, but about half had been sold on the trip. The trader in charge of them rode a horse and carried a whip with a short handle and a long heavy lash divided into several knotted tails at the end. With this whip he cut the shoulders of any that tottered from weariness and pain and straightened them up. He did not speak. The whip conveyed his desire without that. None of these poor creatures looked up as we rode along. They showed no consciousness of our presence, and they made no sound but one. That was the dull and awful clank of their chains from end to end of the long file, as 43 burdened feet rose and fell in unison. The file moved in a cloud of its own making. We put up at the inn in a village just at nightfall, and when I rose next morning and looked abroad, I was where a knight came riding in the golden glory of a new day, and recognized him for one of mine, Sir Ozana le Cure Hardy. He was in the gentleman's furnishing line, and his missionarying specialty was plug hats. He was clothed all in steel, in the beautifulest armor of the time, up to where his helmet ought to have been, but he hadn't any helmet. He wore a shiny stovepipe hat, and was as ridiculous a spectacle as one might want to see. It was another of my surreptitious schemes for extinguishing knighthood by making it grotesque and absurd. Sir Ozana's saddle was hung about with leather hat boxes, and every time he overcame a wandering knight, he swore him into my service, and fitted him with a plug and made him wear it. I dressed and ran down to welcome Sir Ozana and get his news. "How is trade?" I asked. "You will note I have but these 4 left, yet were they 16 when as I got me from Camelot." "Why, you have certainly done nobly, Sir Ozana. Where have you been foraging of late? I am but now come from the Valley of Holiness, please you, sir. I am pointed for that place myself. Is there anything stirring in the monkery more than common? By the mass, ye may not question it. Give him good feed, boy, and stint it not, and thou valuest thy crown. So get ye lightly to the stable, and do even as I bid. Sir, it is parlous news I bring, and be these pilgrims? Then ye may not do better, good folk, than gather and hear the tale I have to tell. Sith it concerneth you, forasmuch as ye go to find that ye will not find, and seek that ye will seek in vain, my life being hostage for my word, and my word and message being these, namely, that a hap has happened whereof the like has not been seen, no more but once this 200 years, which was the first and last time that sad misfortune strake the Holy Valley in that form by commandment of the Most High, whereunto by reasons just and cause thereunto contributing, wherein the matter, the miraculous fount hath ceased to flow? The shout burst from 20 pilgrim mouths at once. Ye say well, good people, I was verging to it even when ye spake. Has somebody been washing again? Nay, it is suspected, but none believe it. It is thought to be some other sin, but none wit what. How are they feeling about the calamity? None may describe it in words. The fount is these 9 days dry. The prayers that did begin then, and the lamentations in sackcloth and ashes, and the holy processions, none of these have ceased nor night nor day, and so the monks and the nuns and the foundlings be all exhausted, and do hang up prayers writ upon parchment, sith that no strength is left in man to lift up voice. And at last they sent for thee, Sir Boss, to try magic and enchantment, and if you could not come, then was the messenger to fetch Merlin. And he is there these 3 days now, and saith he will fetch that water, though he burst the globe and wreck its kingdoms to accomplish it. And right bravely doth he work his magic, and call upon his hellions to hie them hither and help. But not a whiff of moisture has he started yet, even so much as might qualify as mist upon a copper mirror. And ye count not the barrel of sweat he sweateth betwixt sun and sun over the dire labour of his task. And if ye... Breakfast was ready. As soon as it was over, I showed to Sir Ozana these words I had written on the inside of his hat. Chemical Department, Laboratory Extension, Section G, PXXP, send 2 of first size, 2 of number 3, and 6 of number 4, together with the proper complementary details, and 2 of my trained assistants. And I said, Now get you to Camelot as fast as you can fly, brave knight, and show the writing to Clarence, and tell him to have these required matters in the Valley of Holiness with all possible dispatch. I will well, Sir Boss, and he was off. That's the end of chapter 21. Come back tomorrow and we'll read chapter 22, The Holy Fountain.